Dentistry Today is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and to commemorate the occasion, we're launching a series of video interviews with some of the profession's most influential clinicians, looking back on the past 4 decades and looking ahead into the future. Today we're speaking with Dr. Gordon Christensen, a practicing prosthodontist, as well as founder and CEO of Practical Clinical Courses and the Clinicians Report Foundation. He also is a diplomat and fellow of multiple organizations and has presented more than 45,000 hours of continuing education, as well as published numerous books and articles. Dr. Christensen, thank you for joining us today.
Richard, it's my real pleasure. We've been around a long time, so I've got a little perspective that some might not have.
We know that you've written and worked with Dentistry Today before, and of course we wanted to tap into that long experience as we look back at 40 years and look ahead further into the future. So Just to begin, let's start with a very broad perspective. Over the past 40 years, what do you think have been some of the biggest changes in clinical care?
In clinical care, if we look just at the delivery of care, quite obviously it's been the fast evolution of corporates into dental practice. Mm-hmm. And now, if we consider corporates and groups together, we have well over 40% of the population of particularly general dentists. That's been a major. Another major has been the third-party orientation, which has slowly but very significantly pretty well taken over the suggestion of payment for dentistry, for good and for bad. It is allowing service of people who might not have been treated otherwise, but there's a continual disagreement on how it's operated, as you know well. If we look seriously at techniques or concepts for the delivery of care, pretty obviously, way back, the so-called washed field technique came on when Albert Thompson happened to be from Utah. He's now long dead. But he instituted the lavage of the operating field with water, and that changed a lot of things into four-handed dentistry and then into six-handed dentistry. Been a lot of changes in delivery that are very obvious. Also, the delivery of care has also been influenced by the allegation, if not proof, of this of oral care being directly related to systemic orientation. Mm-hmm. With continuing research going on that concept, it will gradually put dentistry back in its place where it was originally before it was split off from medicine in the middle 1800s. So I see that as a significant thing. If you look at techniques and materials, the biggest thing in my career as a board-certified prosthodontist, I'm a surgical prosthodontist, has been the advent of implants, which was about 40 years ago. That has changed almost everything in prosthodontics. When people miss their teeth, they can have a single implant. They can have multiple implants. They can even have their whole mouth of teeth supported by implants. Hardly do I do a treatment plan or diagnosis without some involvement with implants at this particular time. There are many others, but they're some of the ones I see major.
Okay, and speaking of dental implants then, it seems that dental implants began as a specialty among prosthodontists, but we're seeing more general dentists get involved in providing implant treatment. Can you comment on that transition? And do you see that as something that's growing or positive for the profession?
You're very, very correct in observing that. I speak in many, many countries, and in many countries, general dentists are doing the vast majority of implants. To give you examples, South Korea, Israel, many developing countries, the majority of implants are placed by general dentists. However, in the U.S., 40 years ago, it started out to be done primarily by oral surgeons, and it evolved into periodontists, and it evolved into prosthodontists, and then now they're teaching implants surgery to endodontists. So those 4 areas have been leaders. But in America, I'm disgruntled to see that only about 10 or 15% of American dentists are placing implants. whereas well over 90% are restoring them. I would strongly like to see that combination of surgical and restorative placed together. It's like, give you an analogy, much like you're building a house, and let's say the general contractor only knows the basement, only knows the roof. The dentist placing implants should be able to have some knowledge about restoring them. Not the case in the U.S. We need some help there. But as far as that being influential, enormous influence.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a big reason behind the growth of dental implants has to be the technology, both in the design and the make of the implants themselves, as well as the imaging and other diagnostic systems to produce the treatment plan. What have been some of the more significant technologies that you've seen influencing implant treatment?
Probably realistically, the most important one has been cone beam. Cone beam radiology, I was one of the first ones in the world to jump on it. We've had cone beam now for 21 years. I don't know what I would do without cone beam. About half of my implant career has been without cone beam. And as I look back at those years, I think, wow, it's like I didn't kill somebody without the knowledge of the entirety of the head and the various angulations that we're looking at. But it was all by guessing Magali back then, and it worked. I'm not sure that I'm much more efficient with cone beam, but the diagnostic activity is enormously different because we're able to judge where to put the implant, and we're able to judge the density of the bone and the angulation potential by use of cone beam.
And in addition to those diagnostic tools, what about the implant materials themselves? There's such a broad variety that's available these days. Which ones do you see have had the biggest influence or improved the care the most?
Quite obviously, the original implants were either pure titanium or titanium alloy, titanium, vanadium, and aluminum. And the original ones did not have any particular surface orientation that was different from the body of the implant. And they worked. I did a lot of those that were just a slick, shiny surface, and they worked well. However, now every implant company has some mystical surface characteristics they're going to put on, although all of them are basically acid etched and sandblasted as one of the initial characteristics. And then some of those surfaces make them more hydrophilic. Other surfaces allegedly make the bone osseointegrate into the titanium alloy faster. Most of them are titanium alloy. There are some, as you know, that are zirconia, and they're much more popular in other countries than they are in the U.S. There are a few so-called holistic dentists who are primarily placing zirconia implants, but the primary placement is still titanium alloy.
Okay, and of course, keeping up with all these different technologies and just the evolution of treatment techniques requires continuing education. How has continuing education, considering your involvement, how has that changed over the years, for the better, for the worse, or any other way, in your opinion?
Well, having given well over 4,000 courses in my career, CE courses, I've done far more of that in academic environments. It's been an enormous change. Early on, I'm talking 56, I've been practicing 61 years. And as you look back over those years, initially you could not even mention the brand name, which was absolute unadulterated stupidity. You get up and say, brand A is the best. Well, give me a break. I need to know what the brand name A is. I was the first one to break that barrier, to the chagrin of many, many people. And that has continued. Now we can express brand names. And in continuing education, that is mandatory. There are some states right now trying to limit the presentation of brand names, which, again, I'll just say is stupidity.
Mhm.
The dentist wants to know what to use, not what chemicals in it, because the chemical can have various trace elements and surrounding environments that make it good or bad. So that's been a significant change. Unfortunately, there's some influence to try to go back to that retarded way, and I'll use that bad word to express it. In the meantime, COVID has brought on a major change with all of the internet activity.
Mhm.
I've done some over 100 internet courses over COVID, and they've been spread out to 400,000 to 500,000 dentists worldwide.
Mhm.
And that has made a significant impact, but I also am a PhD psychologist. It doesn't even come close to face, not even remotely close. There's even there are even lawsuits right here. We have two major colleges in my area, and there are lawsuits against both schools with students complaining of lack of adequacy of their education, since it was all looking at a stupid glass plane.
Mhm.
Uh, as a psychologist, I can say clearly, going back to face is mandatory. The use of touch and feel is mandatory, and just looking at your face gives me a little bit of your background, but not much.
Okay.
So, are we going to continue now that we've moved most of our courses live? Yeah, we will have a few courses that are done virtual because there are people who can't travel or don't want to travel. There are people who are afraid to stay in hotels, and there are people who don't want to go alone to something. So that has been an unbelievable change in going to. Oh well, I had to do everything virtual for 100 courses. I've learned a lot, though.
So looking ahead, do you think continuing education is going to be some kind of a hybrid model, a mix between
Yeah,
virtual and in person?
I'm assured of that. As we plan in, as you know, I have a couple of organizations. Practical clinical courses is worldwide. And that particular one is international, so I cannot give a course in Thailand, which I'm
Mhm.
doing next week, without doing it virtually. They're not going to come here, and I occasionally go there, but not often. So
Mhm.
that's going to have to remain virtual. And we have ways of making it more interactive by having miscellaneous talking heads instead of just mine, by showing things with webcams. There are various ways to make it much, much more interactive than just like you and I talking today.
Mhm.
So I see a hybrid. The majority of our courses will be, hallelujah, hands-on. They will be.
Okay. And you're already starting to see that looking ahead to the rest of 2021 with in-person courses back on your schedule?
All of our courses from now on, with a very few exceptions, are hands-on. We're already doing it.
Okay. And in addition to your work in continuing education, there's also Clinicians Report, which has had a
Yeah.
significant impact on the industry.
Thank
Can
you.
you can you tell us a little bit about that journey and how it's grown over the years?
It's been very, very interesting, Richard. When we started that, I was kind of criticized by the bodies that so-called evaluated products without
Mhm.
naming them. And I thought, well, when a product comes out, I want to know tomorrow should I get it or not. I don't want to wait until a journal publishes it a year and a half later.
Mhm.
I want to know pragmatic aspects of it, not academic aspects of it, because people who are practicing want to know brand names, they want to know techniques, they want to know when a new product comes and the company hypes it, they want to know, is that realistic or is it all hype?
Mhm.
And that's when we started Clinicians Report Foundation, which was then called CRA. That evolution took off like wildfire. It started in an office. You can see my little office here, which is
Mhm.
about 15 by 15 feet. Started out in a place that small. We're now in 100,000 offices. We're in 93 countries worldwide, and it has grown enormously because of the unfulfilled need that was present. Journals are great. I've been an editor, co-editor, section editor on 19 of them, but they're pathetic in their ability to get information out to the profession. I don't want a book. Look at all those damn books.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you what's in almost all of them. I couldn't tell you because they're historical. All they do is hold up that bookcase. If I were to know something now, what is it? Click. I've got another little computer sitting by me, and often I'll use both computers to answer a question because it's instantaneous. We're seeing enormous change there. So CRA has grown from virtually almost nothing,
Mm-hmm.
run by my PhD wife, Dr. Rella Christensen, for 27 years. I've had it the last nearly 20 years now as the CEO. We have 50 full-time employees that are, we're nonprofit. We're the only 501c3 charity in all of product evaluation, including the major organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So when we evaluate products, we darn well better get it right, or we're going to get sued. And they're going to know. I'm on the internet 5 minutes per week on the answer to the question of the not year, the question of the week. And the question comes up on something, we'll be on it that week, and we'll find an answer. And in 5 minutes, I can pretty well tell it. I don't need a 99-page paper with 75 references on it.
So the internet has been a huge help in disseminating that information and interacting and connecting with readers and clinicians.
Absolutely. The internet, without it, I thought recently, what would we have done had we not had the internet during COVID? We would have essentially lost a full year of knowledge and practice. So the internet has been indispensable. It's good, and I don't have to tell you, it's terrible. It's got both ends of it. In other words, all the hacking and everything. I was reading ARP last night, American Association of Retired People, and they were showing some of the places in various countries, without naming them, where whole offices are filled with hackers trying to extort money from particularly seniors.
So digital security has had its impact, on every industry, including dentistry as well.
It certainly has.
And also, with your work with Clinicians Report, over the years, there have to have been some products, some trends that have popped up and really stood the test of time more than others. Can you pick any particular stories or items that you think were specific?
Most significant, obviously, implants. That's head and shoulders above everything else. However, the cone-beam thing that we've already mentioned, I give Jim Glidewell of Dental Laboratories major credit for literally changing the entire profession. When he stuck his neck out and said, why don't we use zirconia as a crown? And now I got the data just recently, like last week, 90% of crowns coming out of that major laboratory, they make 2 million crowns a year, are zirconia or lithium disilicate. In other words, it's changing markedly from metals. Metals are dying. And the data that came from them is only 2% of the crowns last year were cast metal. That's amazing. That has taken place. Well, the first zirconia bases came out 21 years ago. The full zirconias came out 11 years ago. Lithium disilicate came out 11 years ago. And look what's happened. It's changed the whole marketplace. Also, other things that are starting to gurgle, and I certainly hope in the future will continue to blossom, and that is, well, a word I don't like, bioactive. It's been placed in advertisements on almost everything, allegedly bioactive, half of mine. But they're coming from Israel right now as a major new concept, which is antimicrobiologic restorative materials, not ones that ooze their fluoride or whatever and lose their parasitic concept, but those that have a positive negative reaction. The one that's coming from Israel right now basically has benzalkonium impregnated into the filler in the composites, allowing when microbes touch it, kills them, and it's instant. That's going to be a very significant change in the future. But as far as products that have really made an impact, I have to go back a little further when the impact was even more major. The air rotor handpiece was unbelievable. But one that we're not really up to date on in the U.S. is electric handpieces. If I were in Berlin today or Tokyo, almost everybody's using electric. America was still using a lot of air handpieces, which are fine, but they lose their concentricity fast. With electric, the precision is there. With electric, the torque is there. So they're getting into a lot of the dental schools now. In fact, I'd almost say the majority of dental schools are going from air to electric. You still use air, but electric becomes the premium way to do a tooth prep or to place a post or whatever. So there's been quite a few products like that have made a significant impact.
Okay, and then looking ahead to the next 5 years, 10 years, 40 years, how do you see clinical care evolving, whether it's through technology, through technique, through business practices? What do you see as the next big changes that are going to happen?
The mode of delivery of care, that's what it's going to be, with all the political things that are going on right now. And I will give a ray of light. The ADA said not long ago that 70% of American adults, and let's just look at that number. We've got, 320 or 30 million people in the U.S., about 200, I'm going to be off a little bit, 200 plus are adults. 70% of those adults are seeing a dentist at least once a year. That's astounding. No country even comes close. Literally doesn't come close. So how did we do that? I talk to veterinarians quite often, and they always ask me that. How did dentists get people to come in, 70% of them, once a year? When, physicians don't even come close to that. You got to have a broken leg or bleeding or something to see one. Usually, a few have to characteristics. And it's the fact that dentistry has aimed at prevention over and over and over again, rather than treatment. Well, treatment's got to be done when you fail, but that's not what you think about first. One of my first jobs in helping start new dental schools, which I've done repeatedly, was I was always frustrated if you go into operative dentistry on your first day. What do you get? A handpiece. How to run this handpiece. Who cares? We want to prevent the disease. We don't want to treat the disease on day one. And what it's been is dentistry has evolved. Well, you can think back to the Crest toothpaste and some of those things that came along in the 40s and 50s. That started that preventive trend, and it has continued remarkably. So I see a continuation of preventive. I see more integration into the systemic orientation of dentistry, the evaluation of saliva to detect systemic diseases. I'm sure we're going to see that kind of an orientation happen, and I'll be delighted to see it. I think of some of these extravagant cases being done now, I'm not kidding, at $20,000 to $40,000, rip out the remaining teeth, put screws in. Wouldn't it be so much better to spend a fraction of that to prevent all that disease? It's a frustration to me. More preventive, more access to care, more corporate. Where corporate will end, I don't know. But some prognosticators are saying maybe 60 or 70% of practice will be corporate and group. But there'll still be remaining vestige, if you will, of private practice. There are organizations already starting up to promote the value of private practice, seeing the same dentist every time, becoming like family with the patient, following the procedures that have been done to see the success or failure. So many changes. If you got me going, many changes are going to happen.
Okay, and just to wrap things up then, is there anything else that you'd like to add about changes that you've seen over the past 40 years, or perhaps some of the fundamental principles that have remained the bedrock of dentistry over the past 40 years, and how you expect that to continue into the future?
Yes, thank you. That's a really important question. One thing dentists have always been praised for. The American College of Dentists, International College of Dentists have promoted this, particularly the American College, and that is doing what you would want to have done to yourself. In other words, honesty in treatment planning.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely like to see that trend continue. Some have said something very negative, and I'll repeat it just to say I don't like it, and that is we used to be a profession with a little bit of business. Unfortunately, right now, we threw in too much to a business with a little bit of profession. I would love to see us return, and I'm seeing a trend among many groups, to get back to a true professional orientation, which is do unto others as you would have done unto you. Don't rip out their teeth. Don't do the kinds of things that just make money. So there's going to be a trend to go back to that. But we've got to be careful because there's a major trend that wants to go the other direction.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your perspective with us today, Dr. Christensen.
Thank
Hopefully our audience has learned a lot and they'll continue on this journey with us.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.